Thanks. I want to say thanks to Shangjin Wei and to the Chazen Institute for an opportunity to engage in this conversation. I'll speak mostly about Latin America because nobody else will. And it's terribly important. It's a region of 576 million people that will have over 600 million people in 20 republics by 10 years from now. It has a combined GDP of $5.1 trillion by 2025. If you extend the figures, Brazil will be the 5th largest economy in the world by itself. Mexico and Argentina, if you put those two economies together, are as large as India. So this is an enormously important region, and if you add the non-Latin portions of the Caribbean, basically the English, Dutch, and French-speaking former colonies, this is an economic region of considerable importance. And not just in economic terms, but in ecological terms as well. 40% of the world's remaining rainforests are in Latin America. 35% of the world's reserves of fresh water are there. 23% of the world's cultivable land. So this is a much more important region than you would understand reading either the front pages of the daily newspapers or the business pages where they should know better. I'll just say a couple of words about what I think are two main trends in the region. One has to do with the Caribbean basin, for the most part, and the other has to do with South America. I think if you look at the next 10 years, what you're going to see is the continuation of the shrinkage of American economic and political influence in South America, and in a sense, the retreat of American leverage and capacity to project power in the region to about where it was at the end of the 19th century, when the United States was enormously influential in the Caribbean and Central America, and was the largest external influence in Mexico, but had very little influence beyond this region close to our shores. And I think that shrinkage will have an impact both in the Caribbean region itself and in South America. And if you look closely at what are likely economic trends in Latin America, I think you'll find that that the breaking point in trends is geographic one. If you look at Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean, whose economies are tied very closely to the United States, as U.S. growth stays low, the growth of these economies is likely to remain low as well, since the United States is their principal trading partner. And it seems to me quite unlikely that there will be, despite much effort on the part of the countries in the region, even Mexico, it seems unlikely to me that they will succeed in diversifying their external trading partners and begin to attract significant capital and interest from other parts of the world. This is a region which is tied to the United States and will remain tied to the United States and its slow-growing economy for quite some time to come. The one exception to this, I think, may be the case of Cuba. The recent economic reforms on the island, if they are deepened and developed appropriately, could produce in Cuba, because of its low GDP per capita now, very rapid rates of economic growth. Some based on natural resources, such as gas and oil, which they now have discovered in large quantities, and other natural resources which they can exploit. So that's one opportunity, but part of Cuba's success will be trade diverting, if you will, trade and tourism diverting from other Caribbean islands. If you look, so that's the first thing I see, a Caribbean region, including Mexico, where growth rates are likely to be low, reflecting the close alignment of those economies with the United States. The South American economies, on the other hand, I think will grow more rapidly than the United States, in part because of their success in diversifying their trading partners. For most of the 20th century, Latin America as a whole grew at about the rate of per capita income growth of the United States. That's about 1.5% a year. They should have done better, but there were various reasons why they were unable to do so, some of them institutional, others geographic. But I think now that they have succeeded in diversifying their trading partners, both with respect to Europe and East Asia. The South American economies, led by Brazil, are likely to grow at a much more rapid rate than Mexico and the Caribbean. And in that sense, I agree entirely with estimates that one finds in Beyond the Crisis produced by the Chazen Institute. The reflection of this diverse external economic relationship, I think, will be quite noticeable in political affairs. It's no accident that South American countries have taken the lead in the development of new institutional frameworks, both for trade and for political consultation. And I think that tendency to separate themselves from their heretofore close integration with the United States is likely to continue. They will most likely as well, become far more independent in the way in which they formulate their foreign policy goals and objectives. And the recent example of some rather ham-handled initiatives in that direction by Brazil is likely to become more sophisticated and a more permanent feature of the foreign policies of the countries in that region. So if one were to conclude about these two areas, I would say that U.S. engagement with Mexico and with the Caribbean and Central America will continue to be significant, but in order for it to be successful, the United States will need to be able to think about addressing the issues that are of primary concern to the countries in the region, and to do it in a cooperative and constructive way. And these include trade and economic integration, immigration, drug wars, and the like. These are all issues that are at the top of the agenda of countries in the region, both large and small. If we succeed in addressing them by expanding NAFTA, for example, to include the countries that are part of the Central American Common Market or the Central American Free Trade Agreement area that includes also the Dominican Republic and Panama now, I think there's an opportunity for the United States to create some dynamism that doesn't exist now. But it doesn't seem likely to me that the U.S. will seize this opportunity given the political paralysis that affects this country and the likely opposition to any move to extend and institutionalize free trade arrangements in the region. With respect to South America, I think the efforts by the United States to engage Brazil will likely prove unsuccessful, although they're certainly worth a try. A revival of the talks that collapsed in 2005 to create a free trade zone in the Americas are likely to be revived, but there are opportunities to move in that direction, piecemeal, that the United States could take if it chose to do so. I think what's more likely is that South America will await our attention in the Doha round of trade talks if they ever get started again. So I don't see either with respect to the central to the Caribbean region or with respect to South America, an engagement on part of the United States that's sufficient to help dynamize the economies and to deepen our relationships with either zone. I'll conclude by saying a word or two about Africa, since I've been accused of knowing something about it. I actually don't. I do think, from what an amateur observer can observe, that Africa is an underrepresented huge opportunity in the world economy. Most of the African countries are now beginning to sort out the political differences which have divided them. Years of civil war in some cases are coming to an end. We're not likely to see the emergence of vibrant civil societies and democracies of the kind that we know. We're more likely to see something like what emerged at the end of the 19th century in Latin America. And these are relatively authoritarian regimes, but their difference from the past will be their stability. And stability is perhaps the key to Africa's hopes of economic progress. They have everything else that they need. That is to say, natural resources and interested third parties who are willing to invest in them. So I think the news from Africa is a good one. The difference between the two regions is that in the case of Latin America, I think economics is going to determine the political direction of these regions, whereas I think in Africa, it's politics, that is the ability to create stable regimes that will determine the economic outcome.